At first glance, this seems backward, doesn't it? We're taught selfishness is doing what you want, especially if others don't like it. But Wilde flips that idea. Selfishness isn't freedom, it's control. Think about it. It's not selfish to choose your own path. It's selfish to demand that others walk it with you, or worse, in your place. The mother who tells her child, "You must go to law school because I never did." The friend who says, "If you were a real friend, you'd believe what I believe." The politician who demands unity, but only if unity means obedience. That is the deepest form of selfishness, because it seeks not just your action, but your conformity. Wilde continues, selfishness always aims at creating around it an absolute uniformity of type. Why? Because sameness is safe. Sameness is predictable. And people who crave control will always try to erase difference. But here's where it gets psychological. Control is not power. Control is insecurity with a megaphone. The need to mold others isn't a sign of confidence. It's a sign of fear. Fear that your values don't hold up unless everyone claps. Fear that being different somehow invalidates your identity. Fear that someone else's freedom is an attack on your comfort. And that's why Wilde's next line matters more than ever. Unselfishness recognizes infinite variety of type as a delightful thing, accepts it, acquiesces in it, enjoys it. Real unselfishness, true inner strength, doesn't seek copies. It welcomes contrast. But let's pause here. Let me ask you something. When's the last time you let someone fully be themselves without needing to change them? Or, let's be even more honest. Why? When's the last time you allowed yourself to be that? Because this isn't just about others trying to control you. This is about the mask we wear to avoid rejection. The smile we fake to avoid friction. The silent agreement we offer when deep down we want to scream. Why? Because we're afraid to think for ourselves. And Wilde doesn't let us off the hook. It is not selfish to think for oneself. A man who does not think for himself does not think at all. That's the dagger. If you're outsourcing your judgment, your morality, your identity, you're not just being polite. You're surrendering your mind. And we live in a culture that rewards exactly that. Fit in, say the right thing, share the trending belief, post the acceptable opinion. We call that empathy. But sometimes it's just performance. Now here's the hard truth Wilde delivers next. It is grossly selfish to require of one's neighbor that he should think in the same way and hold the same opinion. Look around. That's what half of the internet is built on. That's what families fracture over. That's what movements morph into when they become mobs. Everyone preaching tolerance until they meet someone who disagrees. But everyone preaching freedom as long as it looks like theirs. We've confused morality with uniformity. But Wilde, like the Stoics, like Nietzsche, like every great independent thinker, knew that truth lives in friction. If someone can think for themselves, they will probably think differently. And that's not a problem to solve. That's a sign of life. But Wilde doesn't stop there. He even has compassion for those who can't think freely. If he cannot think, it is monstrous to require thought of any kind from him. Oof. Read that again. Wilde isn't mocking the unthinking. He's warning us not to demand performance from people who are running on fear. Some people cling to certainty because they were never allowed to explore. Some hold dogma like a lifeboat because thinking is terrifying when you've only ever been punished for it. So what's the solution? Respect, boundaries, and yes, solitude. That's why Wilde ends with something subtle, beautiful, and devastatingly true. A red rose is not selfish because it wants to be a red rose. Let that sit. The rose isn't asking the tulip to change. The rose isn't trying to convert the daisy. The rose doesn't apologize for being red. It just is. And that is the most dangerous, most unselfish thing a person can do. Live as themselves. Without apology, without conformity, without control. In a world of echo chambers and curated identities, that kind of quiet authenticity, it's not rebellion, it's revolution. Let's start with the punchline. Selfishness is not living as one wishes to live. It is asking others to live as one wishes to live. Society gets this backward. We're told that living for yourself is selfish, that doing your own thing, especially if it offends others, is wrong. But Wilde flips the script. You're not selfish because you walk your own path. You're selfish when you demand that everyone else walk it with you. Think about it. Parents who force their kids to mirror their regrets. Friends who demand emotional loyalty to ideas you don't believe in. Leaders who preach freedom, but only for those who agree. That's not care. That's coercion. And Wilde names it. Selfishness isn't rebellion. It's control. And here's the psychological twist. Control is born from fear. Fear that someone else's difference threatens your identity. So you try to flatten the room, make everyone think like you. But Wilde saw the tragedy of that. Selfishness always aims at creating around it an absolute uniformity of type. Sameness, safety, sameness, safety. But at what cost? The cost of freedom, the cost of individuality, the cost of thought. And that's exactly where we go next. If selfishness is conformity, what does real freedom actually look like? Stay with me. You're about to see why most people aren't selfish. They're just scared of thinking for themselves. Wilde writes, "It is not selfish to think for oneself. A man who does not think for himself does not think at all." Brutal, but honest. Because let's face it, most people don't think. They echo. They repeat. They subscribe to whatever's trending, shared, approved, and they think they're being virtuous by doing it. But if you're living by default, not design, are you really living at all? Wilde says no. A man who does not think for himself does not think at all. Here's the truth. The moment you start thinking for yourself, you become unpredictable. And that's terrifying to people who rely on groupthink to feel safe. Why do so many demand we educate ourselves when what they really mean is agree with me? Why is disagreement now labeled as selfishness when it's actually independence? Wilde goes deeper. It is grossly selfish to require of one's neighbor that he should think in the same way and hold the same opinion. Let that hit. Requiring sameness isn't virtue. It's vanity. And here's where it gets real. Some people can't think differently, not because they're bad, but because they've never been shown how. Wilde understood this too. If he cannot think, it is monstrous to require thought of any kind from him. Not everyone can walk the path of radical clarity. But, and forcing them to think like you, that's not education. It's violence in disguise. And yet, the deeper message here isn't just about others. It's about you. Are you thinking your own thoughts? Or just trying to be accepted? We're not done yet. Because Wilde ends with an image so quiet, so beautiful. It might just change how you see your entire life. One sentence, one rose, and a revelation about freedom you'll never forget. Wilde writes, "A red rose is not selfish because it wants to be a red rose." That line stopped me, because most of us are still apologizing for being who we are. We dull our voice. We change our opinions mid-sentence. We perform. We conform. All because we've been trained to believe that living authentically is offensive. But the red rose, it doesn't need permission to bloom. It doesn't shrink because someone prefers lilies. It doesn't call itself selfish for simply being itself. And that is freedom. Not the loud kind that demands attention. Not the trendy kind that needs hashtags. None. The quiet, sovereign kind. The kind that lives deeply and lets others live too. Because when you stop demanding others become copies of you, and stop letting others rewrite you into a version they can tolerate, you become real. You become dangerous. You become free. The rose doesn't ask to be loved. It simply blooms. And so should you. So, what if the world's been lying to you about selfishness? What if living truthfully, unapologetically, isn't selfish at all, but the highest form of integrity? What if thinking differently isn't rebellion, but responsibility? What if you've spent years contorting yourself into a version the world prefers, while the real you, the red rose, waited patiently to bloom? Ooh. Oscar Wilde didn't write this quote to shock us. He wrote it to free us. Free us from shame, from forced conformity, from the idea that harmony means hiding who you are. So if you've ever been told, you're difficult, you're selfish, you're too much, maybe that was never the truth. Maybe that was someone else's discomfort, trying to keep you small. And if today you feel like you're waking up, like you're finally ready to stop apologizing, to stop performing, to stop asking permission to be yourself, then this isn't just a video. This is your permission slip. To bloom, to diverge, to live as you wish to live, without asking others to follow. Because the red rose? Oscar, it's not selfish. It's alive. And so are you. A red rose is not selfish because it wants to be a red rose. Oscar Wilde. If this spoke to something real in you, don't just nod. Leave a comment below. I choose to bloom. And if you know someone who's been shrinking to survive, share this with them. But us. Not because they need to be like you, but because they need to remember who they are. And finally, if you're ready for more conversations like this, about clarity, sovereignty, inner strength, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and keep walking this path with me. Quiet minds are dangerous. Free minds are contagious. Stay different. Stay sovereign. Stay blooming. I'll see you in the next one.